Welcome, everybody, to 5 ways to keep your couple connection strong postpartum. I am joined today by the fabulous Abby Burd, who I ran into in Facebook land, and I'm so grateful. She is a perinatal mental health specialist in San Diego, which I totally want to visit someday, a licensed clinical social worker in California, and a certified perinatal mental health person. She's passionate about pregnancy and birth like me, and she rejoices in her 2 lovely daughters. She's a member of the Postpartum Health Alliance and has served on the executive board. And she's also the founder of Bird Psychotherapy and the fourth trimester online school, where she teaches about postpartum depression, prevention, and how to keep your relationship strong after baby arrives, which is what we are going to be talking about today. Welcome, Miss Abby.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, basically what we wanted to talk about today was a couple of things. So one, sort of what's happening in the postpartum period to your brain and your emotions and your senses and how that all intermingles with your relationship. Talking a little bit about why it's important to think about these things, and then some practical tools that folks can take away. So what I'm wondering to start with is maybe we can actually create a definition for is there a defined period for postpartum? Like, what is the postpartum period?
So that is a great question. If you want to consult like a technical diagnostic manual, they may look at postpartum as being the first year. So it's really debatable. Like your, old school OBGYN will say, it's just 6 weeks and then it's over, which we know is bunk. I think 1 year is bunk. I think you can be 7, 8 years into it and still not be fully adjusted to the transition.
Yeah.
So if you want to think about it really is just like natural transition time in your life, there's a lot of changes that happen, not just to your body and your hormones, but to your identity and your roles, and of course your relationships. So I think I really don't put a time limit on it. Like if you feel like you are still kind of adjusting and you're like, whoa, where did the last 6 years go? You're not alone.
Totally. I love that because, I had a friend who she got diagnosed with postpartum depression at about 2 years. And I've been almost experiencing this lately, not just like her daughter went through a massive sleep regression. And so she was transported back, and my daughter's going through teething and sickness right now. And I am right back at like 3 months. I'm not sleeping. I'm exhausted. This baby is like crying with no solution in sight. And my brain is totally back to where it was in the early postpartum days. So it can definitely hit you anytime. And I'm totally feeling like there's these waves or like phases, like you hit a year and there's this transition, and now my daughter's 18 months and there's this whole new like adjustment and transition that's happening. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just to throw out there along the same lines, some women will actually be fine postpartum, but then if they're breastfeeders, when they wean from breastfeeding, they'll experience total major hormonal shifts that can lead to mood and anxiety and clearly relationship issues as well.
Totally. So maybe you can walk us through some of the different factors that are at play in this postpartum phase, as long and not so lovely as it might be, that can really impact our ability to show up fully in our relationship and be present.
Okay. So for, I'm going to want to talk about things that aren't just specific to the birthing parent. And so these may be there are a few things that are specific if your body has gone through the birth, pregnancy, and delivery, but there's also a ton of factors that relate to the non-birthing parent too.
Totally.
So maybe we'll start with like kind of like some of the birthing changes. Like we know that there's hormonal changes. We know that for some women, their moods are tied to their hormones. And so if going a little bit off topic, but if you are someone who really experienced mood changes with your cycle, if you noticed the week before you had a lot of depression and anxiety, there's even more research coming out now that could put you at risk for postpartum depression and anxiety if you are sensitive to those hormonal changes. And then, especially as we're talking about relationships and sex and physical intimacy, there's just massive physical changes. Birth can be extremely traumatic. And then even best case scenario, birth is still a major biological event in your body that is impacting and changing your body. So there's so much. It's going to affect women's body image. It's going to affect libido as the hormones are involved. And then it's almost like your body's like all different and you have to get to know it again. So one thing that's kind of fun that I like to talk about is if you want to think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint, your body wants you, and your brain and everything wants you to keep that little creature alive. So if there is a drive to propagate the species, they're going to say like, wait, don't have any new babies yet. You keep this little newborn alive. And so I think, especially for heterosexual couples, they may experience like no, you can get me pregnant, please stay away. So that, and then I've also heard from gay and lesbian couples as well, and queer couples and trans couples, that there's still this desire to turn towards the infant and turn away from their partner, and that's like a physical hormonal like automatic thing. In addition to just this sense that this new little creature needs me to survive, that grown up over there can take care of themselves.
I always equate it to kind of this like spotlight, right? And so your spotlight used to be focused on your person because that was like where you had all the energy was able to focus. And now, like hormonally, biologically, and emotionally, your spotlight's on this tiny little human you're trying to keep alive. And you can't really focus it the other way. And I know for me, a couple of other things that contributed were, there's the feelings of like being touched out and having too much baby on you. But I actually had the opposite reaction in the early days. So the first 2 months or so, I think maybe my partner was worried I was feeling touched out. And so I just was like, where's my kisses? Where's my love? Or like, maybe he was struggling with how to interact with me. Now that I have a toddler and, once I've been breastfeeding for a year, I was like, hell no, nobody touched me. But also I had a lot of pain, right? So there were times in the early days where my daughter would feed for an hour and a half, like 45 minutes per boob. My sacrum hurt. I'm sitting on something hard. I'm uncomfortable. I'm hot. I'm sweating. I am emotionally flooding. And maybe we can talk about this term. I'm just like frustrated in all the ways. And I don't have time I don't have the resources to be patient or kind or loving to you right now because I'm so focused on myself and this little human.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, all of that's going on.
Yes, that.
Why is it important to be thinking about our relationship during this time or intimacy? And like, why is it worth devoting some brain space to it?
Yeah, so we just covered just a few of all the reasons why that other adult is going to be like lower down on the priority list. And so I think why you're asking is, why should we bother to maybe prioritize it and bring them back up? So if you are in a relationship with your partner and the two of you are the foundation of your family, think of it as a house where the two parents are really the foundation of the house. And if the foundation of your house is cracked or weak or broken, the whole thing's going to come tumbling down.
Yeah, I always like to think too of like your relationship can be a source of stress or it can be a source of support. So when you already have a lot of different stresses and fatigue and other things going on, your relationship can be this other thing that you're worrying about, or you can take that little bit of time to make it something that's actually contributing to your mental health and allowing you to feel like safe and supported. And I also like to think of like the long-term piece. So I don't know kind of, where you tend to see people when it comes to sex and relationships. I often see people usually like 1 or 2 years in, where they're going,
Mhm.
okay, this still hurts, it's uncomfortable, or we're not really making sex a priority, and I don't want it to get to the point where
Yeah.
it's the elephant in the room, or where it's a trigger point for us. It's quickly
Mhm.
getting there. Or I see people who are like 6, 7 years in, and their kids are getting older now, and they've left it for so long, they're really
Right.
feeling lost. They feel like they're in a relationship with a business partner or a roommate,
Right.
and they're super great at getting the groceries and doing the chores and managing who's picking up whom, but they don't feel this like romantic, loving connection anymore, and they feel kind of
Exactly.
isolated and lonely as a result, right?
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, that can lead to divorce, which is sometimes very needed, and sometimes it could have been totally avoidable if we
Right.
watered our gardens, for lack of a better expression.
Yeah.
um so if we think about, well, what does thinking about it or investing in it look like, if we were to think about some practical tools?
Yeah. So when I think about, especially kind of like the first year and those early days, I think of how time is at such a premium.
Hmm.
There's such limited resources, not just of time, but of energy, money, emotional input. And so it does feel like you have to really choose very wisely where you're going to invest your energy, time, love, all of that. And so why, like, I think we talked a little bit about why we feel like it's important. And I think anybody who's listening to this probably has some desire to prioritize the relationship. So how do we do it? And so one suggestion I have, and this is true for a lot of things, is rather than think of like the grand, huge things that we used to do, like a big date night where you go out to a fancy dinner and you come home. It's like 5 hours. You have to pay the babysitter 6 hours. You have to pay so much for all the rest. Maybe like think about like little things you can do that don't take very long. Maybe it doesn't cost a little bit of money. It's just not a huge investment, and just those little things sprinkled throughout can have a bigger impact.
Totally. I like to think of it as like a micro intimacy,
Yes.
or right, all these tiny
Yeah.
little gestures that show that you love the person, and that just create this environment of like love and connection, and of feeling loved and supported. And that's different for everybody. And I think
Yes.
love languages are really
Yep.
critical in terms of like knowing what your person's love
Yep.
language is.
So
Coming
let's
home
circle
with
back to love languages, but I
Mhm.
love that you said micro intimacy, because the analogy that I had in my head but didn't say out loud was micro mindfulness. So
Yes.
I'll talk to individuals who are like, I don't have time to go to like an hour-long yoga class and all that. It's like, how can you find 30 seconds to just be present, maybe connect with your breath, or maybe practice some self-compassion.
Totally.
So now you're translating it to the relationship. I can't talk. The
And so,
relationship.
yeah, so the question there is, how can you find 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes to properly kiss your partner? To,
Okay, let's talk about the 6-second kiss.
yes, you talk about
Okay,
it.
so I did not invent this. This comes from John and Julie Gottman, who are really some of the premier researchers on what makes marriages last and work. And they said that it takes about 6 seconds into the kiss for like the oxytocin to release, and you get that good feeling. And so if you don't have 6 hours for a massive date night, you could find 6 seconds, okay, round it up to a minute if you want to, have some preliminary going into it. And I think a lot of times with couples, they don't kiss unless it's like, okay, let's do the foreplay thing so we can do the sex thing. And by just making it be the kiss, it's taking that pressure off of it. And it's in a way kind of taking you back to your first date. On your first date, maybe there was, or maybe there wasn't like a big expectation of what it would lead to. It's really just kissing for the sake of kissing. And so
Totally.
it's a chance to just experience just that, taking the pressure off, taking other expectations off, just taking a moment. And then, so oxytocin, you may be familiar with it as like the love hormone. It can be released during sex, kissing, breastfeeding. Sometimes new moms, especially if they're breastfeeding and cuddling their babies, are getting that oxytocin and that intimacy and that physical touch with their baby. And maybe they don't need it from their partner. Some do, some don't. And so making that, so what it does is it can kind of really soothe away some of the irritability. And we haven't talked yet about sleep deprivation. That's like a huge factor for new parents. And so if you think about sleep deprivation making you kind of irritable, and a lot of other factors that are going on with postpartum adjustment might make us irritable or even rage. So the oxytocin's like the antidote, and it just kind of soothes over the edges. And it's like, oh, I can let that one slide. I don't have to react to everything.
Totally. Yeah. It doesn't make the sleeplessness go away, but it totally takes the edge off. I love that. And it's so true that we often get stuck in like, oh, making out means sex, but it doesn't have to. There's so much pleasure in making out without, just for the sake of making out.
Yeah.
And I know my partner and I will often get caught in like the pecs, it's like this routine, thoughtless.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. And sometimes I'll be like, no, like actually kiss me, please. Like I want to feel your presence is really more what that's about. Yes, we're touching, but I want to feel you just being present with me for a breath.
Yeah. So that 6-second kiss can get you to the place of vulnerability and presence. And you do have to kind of make a conscious effort to not pull away or laugh or go somewhere else. And so it is a really, really helpful thing. And so the Gottmans suggest at least once a day, and check in with your partner and, kind of remind each other. You can ask each other like, oh, have we done our 6 seconds yet today?
I love that. Eye gazing is also a huge one for me, right? Or like a full body hug, or hugging for more than 6 seconds. And just again, being like, okay, I'm in my busy brain. I'm just going to land here with you for less than a minute. Right. I think people sometimes forget to flirt. And I know for me, like I can get really serious when I'm sleep deprived and like nothing's funny. And I get in this like, oh, attitude. But my partner's really great at like reaching in and trying to be silly, trying to impress me, butt slaps, sexy texts, like anything that just sort of like snaps you out of that like, oh, I'm so tired bubble.
Well, that flirting is great. And I love the idea that you brought that up. Sometimes with couples, it's like, okay, kids are in bed. Okay. It's like and some people can turn the switch on and some people can't. And so if one or both of you in your relationship doesn't just flip the switch and you're ready to go, flirting throughout the day is a way to really build that slow burn.
Totally. That simmer, as they say. Anything else that you can think of or questions that you typically get from folks about just how to build that strong foundation or how to keep that strong foundation in those early days and throughout our postpartum period?
I think communication is so important. Just knowing that really everything has changed. Your go-to ways of connecting, your go-to ways of soothing each other might be different. You yourself are going to be different. Your partner is going to be a different person. And so it's going to take a lot of communication and checking in, like how are we doing? How are you doing? There's a lot more awareness these days on moms' mental health in the perinatal stage. So during pregnancy and after depression and anxiety, but there's still not enough awareness about dads and other partners. So the rate of postpartum mood and anxiety disorders in dads is 1 in 10.
Okay.
And so we don't even like think about that. But depression and anxiety play a huge role in relationships. And when either one or both partners has any kind of depression or anxiety, that's going to create a huge impact in how you respond to each other. How motivated are you to connect or to try new things? your irritability, are you going to respond in a more negative way? Are you going to be more likely to be in a positive way? So that's a big thing to screen for, is to really make sure that both partners are getting enough support.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that was huge for sure in my period,
Mhm.
was just checking in constantly about who is needing what, who is needing sleep right now, who is needing food, who needs a shower, who needs
Yeah.
some love.
And then to kind of go back to postpartum sex. So there's a study that came out pretty recently by Motherly that was looking at women in the postpartum stage, and there was it was a alarmingly high, I should pull up the real statistic, but it was an alarmingly high percentage of women were starting postpartum sex earlier than they actually felt ready.
Yeah,
And that led to more pain and less enjoyment, which is kind of like a cycle, and then you're not going to want to do it again. And they actually were looking at ages too, like older moms versus younger moms, and millennial moms in particular were not really honoring their own needs and their own timing. So I think it's really important to know that a 6-week checkup from an OB, all clear, like, yeah, you're good to go, is like very basic, and that might not be your timing. You might need a lot more time, and you would be quite normal and within the average range if you need longer than that. So it's trying to speak up, communication, consent, and then finding other ways to be intimate in the meantime.
totally. Naked, sexy, fun time is what it's all about, right? Pressure free, no expectation. Just get naked and have fun together. And maybe there's intercourse and maybe there's not, and that's okay.
Great.
Cool. I'm going to wrap us up since my laptop is dying. I'm having a technology morning, everybody. I want you to tell us all about your course that is coming up. Please tell us about relationships after baby.
Yes, I'd love to. So this is my second course, and I can go back to the first if you want, but this one is, as the title implies, all about relationships after baby. It launches Valentine's Day, so that's like, what, a week.
Mhm.
And pre-sales are actually open now. So I've opened up pre-sales. What pre-sales mean is that you can get it for 50% off for $99. And then after that, on New Year, I can't talk. Valentine's Day, it goes up to $149, which is still less than the cost of one couples therapy session. And so it's an online self-paced course. You can either take it yourself or with your partner. That is totally fine. You might have a partner that's like, yeah, let's do it. Or you might, typically, one partner is a little bit more interested. You can still go through it and say, like, okay, I like this one, I like this one, let's do these together. So it's, I like to offer up a buffet of skills and solutions. I have a little bit of background information, and then I really like to get into strategies. I think you can find a lot of information on the internet, maybe too much information. So I've kind of filtered through it on what to expect. But what you can't really find readily available online is the solutions. And so these are solutions that you usually just find in therapy. They're evidence-based. They come, we mentioned the Gottman. So it comes from really the leading researchers and practitioners of relationship therapy. So the skills that are going to help you with actual practical working things that you and your partner can do at your own pace. Sometimes you don't have, I know we talked about the expense, but sometimes you don't have the schedule or the childcare to get out to relationship counseling. So this is something you can do at home on your own time, do it in a marathon, or just do a little bit here or there.
Awesome. It sounds amazing. And I've had a sneak preview, and there's amazing, amazing stuff in there and really practical tools, as Abby was saying, to implement. So I will make sure that the link to the course for pre-sales is in the comments, and we'll send it out via email and make sure everybody knows about it.
Right?
You can check out Abby at many different places. Birdtherapy.com is probably the best one, or on Instagram at Burd Therapy, or Facebook Burd Psychotherapy and Education if you want to learn more. And she does also have a postpartum depression prevention course as well through the Fourth Trimester School that you can check out. So Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sophia. I
Um,
enjoyed it.
and we'll talk to you again and often, I am sure.
Sounds great.
Have a good one.
All
Bye.
right, you too. Bye.